Hi everyone, and welcome to the Friday, October 29th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone, and I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman of NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove, and our host, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Okay, so what's new?
What's new?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I know what you're getting at. If there's anything that can unseat the Silicon Valley so far this week, it was Tesla.
Tesla.
I mean, what a week, what a day, really, for Tesla.
$1 trillion company.
Yeah.
It's what, the sixth one, seventh one?
Well, right. So Facebook was, but Facebook is not right now. So actually, Tesla leapfrogged Facebook into the fifth most valuable company in the U.S. with $1 trillion valuation. Now, there are a couple of them.
That was the Hertz order, right?
That was the Hertz order, yeah. And this is significant,
Yeah.
I think, for those of us who do follow the EV stuff pretty closely. Hertz saying they would buy 100,000 Teslas, so they'll be electric, to replace what, remember, is an industry, the used car industry, that really got decimated because of COVID. They had to sell
Right.
off all their cars, so now it's tough to get one. So to replace those with EVs is significant, I think, in the
That's got to be a
environment.
major capital investment because you go to every Hertz counter
Yeah.
in the parking lot, they've now got to install charging stations.
Right, right. And that is something else that Tesla is good at. So, yet another market opportunity. And I honestly don't know what 100,000 cars means to Hertz in terms of percentages, in terms of how many rentals they do a day. I mean, I recently rented a car and it was a madhouse. I mean, everybody's doing it now that they're traveling. So 100,000 in the grand scheme of things, I don't know, but it sounds like a significant number. 50,000 will go to Uber apparently. There's a deal so that Uber will start to give its drivers electric cars. So
Okay.
there is a movement towards the EV in significant ways besides the actual car companies,
Well,
which we know are also getting into
Think
this.
of the marketing. All these people that normally drive piston engine cars go on a flight somewhere on vacation
Mhm.
and they rent a Tesla. And they say, oh, okay, well, this is nicer than I thought, or it's not as much trouble as I thought.
Right. And that's going to be I think the light bulb moment for a lot of people is to realize, the only difference besides Tesla's maddening insistence of putting a whole lot of technology into their cars is the fact that you're driving, hey, this is whatever, it's a sedan. I can fit my kids, I can fit some luggage in the back and in the front. And by the way, I don't have to gas up. And that's nice. Now, the only concern is, let's say you have a trip that's 300 400 miles because you're, I don't know, seeing colleges or visiting some relatives. At some point you will have to charge up.
Sure.
And the map will tell you where to go and all that, but that's going to take longer than just going to a gas station.
Right, and pumping 10 gallons in.
Yeah. But
Okay.
nonetheless, I mean, the monetary stuff was incredible. I mean, Tesla went up more than $100 billion in value in a day
Right.
on that news, which is incredible. Musk soars to the richest man in humanity, or at least in the United States, and Tesla becomes the fifth most valuable company in the country.
Is there any, I've always wondered about this, repeat customers? How good is Tesla at getting people who have now owned a Tesla and found the experience so positive they come back and buy another one?
In the
Do you
early
know?
days, that was really how they got their new models out in the wild. Because remember, Tesla's never advertised, so it's all been
Right.
word of mouth. And remember, in the early days, it was also a very niche clientele. You had to have a lot of money to have one of those early Teslas.
Oh, sure.
The first three, the Roadster, the S, the X, are very expensive cars until the Model 3 came along and you could get it in the 30s or 40s. That's a big, big difference. And when the Model 3 came out, there was this big rush, and they initially went to previous Tesla customers who wanted them.
Gave them first priority.
Yeah, and so it's been this sort of, until recently, sort of internal community of Tesla drivers who would tell other people who were well-heeled enough,
Right.
hey, it's not a big deal to go electric. You'll feel good about it, and by the way, you're going to turn heads in the way that you won't even turn heads in a Porsche.
So it makes me wonder then, I would love to see the numbers now that it isn't this inside baseball thing and it's everyday people trying to buy these cars and use them. How many come back? How many? It's like the old, I'm a Chevy man, I'm a Ford man, I'm a
Right.
Dodge man. Is there a Tesla person now?
There is, and while that's good for Tesla, and I recognize that. My goal in all this is to see people who are not just Tesla people, but are EV people.
Yeah.
For example, I own an EV. My next EV, well, maybe it won't be a Tesla. Maybe it won't be a Bolt. I love the Bolt. It's great. Economical, fits stuff, fits kids, whatever. But maybe the next one will be, I don't know, a Volvo, a Ford, a Rivian truck. The thing that the EVers want to see is more of them. Now, people will call everything that comes out a Tesla killer.
Right.
That's a misnomer. Every time a company comes out with the idea of, hey, we're going to go electric, Tesla stock seems to go up. Why? Because there's more market acceptance of what they are the leader in. And that's Musk's secret. For all of his craziness and tweets and cryptocurrency, the important thing here is more people going electric. And I think we're going to see that with more models. And if people shy away from Teslas because they want a Rivian or a Ford or a Nissan or whatever, well, okay.
Well, we're certainly seeing the major car companies doing a serious move.
Yes.
I mean, when you start seeing BMWs and Mercedes going electric, it's like, okay, even the top end is making their move into EV.
Right, and that's a market that you're going to have to convince. People love their BMWs and they love their Mercedes, and maybe the next time they rent a car, they'll say, "Oh, I could go EV too." Who knows?
Okay, let's talk about the biggest thing in your life right now, besides kids in school, the Holmes trial.
Yes.
Theranos. Okay, I got an interesting message from one of our LinkedIn listeners, and he said, you don't need to use my name, but he said, if you read Bad Blood,
yes,
do you remember there's a brief mention of Elizabeth Holmes's father, I think his name was Christian Rasmus Holmes IV, who worked in the federal government in the senior executive service, which is, it's not civil service, it's one step above that. And her mom was I believe she was a government employee of some kind, congressional aide or something.
Well, right. I mean, this led to a lot of those early government contacts.
Yes. Well, that's his question. We said, we mentioned that it was like all old powerful men. How much of a role did her parents play? When did her dad take her to the Commonwealth Club or the Marines Memorial and say, or did she say, Secretary Schultz, I don't know if you remember me, but do you remember my dad? You and him worked together on the XYZ affair. How and did the parents have a major stake in the company?
You mean like a shareholder stake?
Yeah.
Well, I'm guessing they got a bunch of friends and family shares at least. Her brother worked for Theranos for some time. Her brother Christian,
right?
I assume named after. The parents, according to the reporting done by John Carreyrou in Bad Blood, were a little bit instrumental in the contacts, but also remember she did go to Stanford for a bit, and there were some professors in there that have those contacts. You don't have to go too far into government before you get Stanford connections, just like you'd get Princeton or Yale connections, famously. So there were a lot of factors that brought her, as opposed to, let's say, when I was 19 years old, into some of those connections that none of us would have had at the time.
Yeah, so, I mean, mom and dad may have legitimized some of this. I mean, I find it very interesting, the nature of these investors you've been listening to the last few weeks and hearing about. It's that they're not standard tech investors, especially cutting edge tech investors.
No, but remember, in Washington, you had people like George Shultz saying, well, I remember Elizabeth Holmes as a young woman, like 19 years old. Switch coasts. Let's go to Sand Hill Road. Tim Draper, I've interviewed him about Theranos. He would say, well, I remember Elizabeth Holmes as a precocious 19-year-old. Again, who among us at 19 is talking to government officials and VCs at the same time? So there's, something to do with Stanford, something to do with her precociousness and smart and all that stuff. But there were connections, and some of them were family connections.
He asked one other question. He said, although VCs invested their own money, did any VC firms invest their limited partner funds into Theranos?
That I don't know. Remember,
he said, my understanding is not one VC firm invested until the very end, while all the biotech life science VCs avoided Theranos?
Um, a lot of the biotech and healthcare VCs did avoid Theranos because they're the ones that would do the due diligence.
Yeah,
But no, among the very early VCs was that Draper fund.
that's
That
right.
Tim Draper was
Tim
in
was
very,
in there at the very start, and he was
yeah,
the biggest supporter too.
very much so. And he was very vocal, and you had to know that someone that influential was telling other VCs, not to mention any other contacts he had about Theranos in the early days. So I don't know what they invested in terms of limited partnerships. Again, we haven't had a Tim Draper on the stand yet.
Yeah,
We had just the other day, and this made the rounds on social media, the financial advisor for the DeVos family, as in Betsy DeVos, the former education
yes,
secretary, who famously put $100 million into Theranos. One of the very biggest, up there with Rupert Murdoch,
yeah.
investments into Theranos. And that was interesting because the prosecution is using her to claim that, you know, Elizabeth Holmes misled Betsy DeVos into throwing $100 million down the drain, which, boy, did that light things up for every political party on Twitter.
I can imagine. Murdoch didn't show up this week.
Not yet. But
Did the reporters lose their bet?
no, I don't think there was a bet on whether he'd show up. But interestingly enough, the last day of the week turned
Yeah.
out to be Wednesday.
Okay.
Because there was a water main break about 3 blocks away in downtown San Jose in the early morning. By the time we showed up at court, they had made the decision to shut it down. There was no water in the courthouse, and perhaps just as importantly for those involved, no water for the Starbucks 2 blocks away. So they were shut down, and so we missed an entire day of court and have to now do some catching up. So who knows what witnesses were backed up because of that?
Interesting. So, what was the biggest news? Was DeVos, or
Yeah.
did anything else come out this week?
This was all DeVos this week because, again, we lost a day
Yeah.
and a couple of days of testimony for the person who was managing the DeVos family money. And, those of us who sort of covered the Betsy DeVos story or just read about it from afar
Right.
knew there was some wealth, but didn't realize until I heard this just how much wealth generationally the DeVos family has. And none of us really heard of her until, she became education
You
secretary.
mean you don't blow $100 million on an investment lark?
No. I mean, that's real money, and I think that puts her maybe a second as an individual to Murdoch.
Okay, Facebook. Facebook is it's having a bad time, boy. This was not a good week. We had a new whistleblower say that Facebook officials were often indifferent about public concerns regarding problematic content or undercut efforts to respond due to concerns about political blowback from then President Donald Trump. So I guess there was concern about obviously a concern about Russian interference, and a communications official, Tucker Bounds at Facebook, said, "Don't worry about it. It'll be a flash in the pan. Flash in the pan. Some legislatures will get pissy, and then in a few days they will move on to something else. Meanwhile, we are printing money in the basement, and we are fine."
Yeah, that's a great quote. I have in the past interviewed Tucker Bounds.
Yeah.
So when I saw his name pop up there, I thought, woof, because he was pretty early Facebook, and he
Yeah.
was a big guy in the government stuff. And, this shows that the company wasn't just what, Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg have been talking about. Hey, we're just this open platform. And of course, that has risks because it's a wide open platform. But really, they were drilling down politically into some areas that should have given them concern. Not only have I interviewed Tucker Bounds, but the other day I got to talk to Shira Frankel, the co-author of that book, An Ugly Truth. And what sticks out about that book, even to me as someone who's covered Facebook for years, is how deep Frankel and Cecilia Kang got into the meetings that they had at Facebook. That's what made my jaw drop.
Yeah, when you bring the PR people into the board meetings and the special hidden meetings, something serious is going on, and it's a deep philosophical thing. The company's deciding to do something that they're really worried about them doing it.
Yeah, and the whistleblowing sort of cavalcade now.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what we haven't seen from another company, at least that I can remember. This consistent drip, drip, and now it's a flood of people Have these people completely relinquished their ties to the company? Have they cashed in all their stock options? Are they, I don't know, living under assumed names? Are they worried about this?
At what point does talent? I mean, these things, these companies, in my experience, it's that Pareto principle. 20% of the people are doing everything important at a given company. When they start leaving, the company starts to die. It becomes increasingly inconsequential, no matter how great it was. We saw that happen at Microsoft
And Yahoo
and Yahoo.
and HP.
Yeah, are we seeing any indication of that going on at Facebook yet?
Yes, there are trickles coming out that it's having trouble hiring engineers.
I mean, if I
and
was
people,
Tucker Bounds and I was there at the beginning, I must have a lot of money.
right.
And I might be getting up one morning, shaving, and going, why am I doing this anymore? Why am I submitting myself to this? I got so much money, I can just, go live on an island somewhere.
Well, it depends if you still believe in the message. And I think what we're learning from some of these whistleblowers, however much money they have or don't have, is that they did just that. They woke up one day, or maybe it was a gradual thing, and realized not only do I not believe in this message, but I think we're doing something wrong. And that's a hard way to go through life.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever job you have,
It's
if
that
you
moment you realize you might be the bad guy.
right, and that's tough. And so I feel for these people. The world is a better place because they're doing this. Because we really need to somehow shore up the misinformation that is just cascading from these social media companies. Also, earlier this week, not just to pick on Facebook and Instagram, we had hearings on Capitol Hill with TikTok, Snap, and YouTube.
Didn't get a lot of coverage, I noticed.
It didn't because Facebook was dominating the narrative, but I made sure to talk about those guys because when you talk to young people, some of them are saying, oh, you're doing all this stuff on Facebook. We're not worried about them anymore. We've moved on to TikTok and to Snap. And so it's important because they're not yet getting the headlines and they're not as notorious, but they are where the young people are going to. And so it's important if we're talking about the concerns of social media that we talk about the whole pie, I think, of social media.
Well, that's a nice segue to a note I got from Bob Grove. He said, you have to wonder if Facebook can single-handedly drag down the entire social media sector. The company's bad conduct, secrecy, lying to Congress, and overall contempt has riled up legislators and regulators alike. Their reaction may be triggered by the Facebook extremes, but their response will be applied to the entire sector.
Well, let's give some credit. That's a good comment. And let's give some credit based on what he said to these legislators. Remember, we were laughing at them pretty recently when they were asking Mark Zuckerberg how Facebook made money. Now they're hip enough to say, okay, while you all are focusing on Instagram, we're going to talk to TikTok and Snap and YouTube. And that tells me that they're looking a little more broadly.
They're getting more sophisticated.
Right. Instead of the one big fat whale target,
right,
a legitimate target, they are looking at social media in a broader way. So he's right. The Facebook effect in this way is broadening the spotlight, if that makes sense, onto the other companies. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. Finally, the SEC is talking about holding Mark Zuckerberg personally responsible for Facebook's actions.
I mean, he's the boss.
I can't believe they can do that.
I don't know how that would work.
It'd be pretty hard to pierce the corporate veil, but you never know. I mean, Congress and the SEC are looking pretty vindictive these days.
Well, look, Facebook is talking about this renaming thing. And while people are having fun saying, oh, what is Facebook going to call itself? Maybe that means they do sort of an alphabet. What Google did as a sort of a parent overall umbrella company. And so Facebook stays Facebook, Instagram stays Instagram, but there's this umbrella company called whatever.
Yeah.
That may be a way to, then Zuckerberg says, I'm just going to run Facebook, like the Google guys did, and then say, okay, we'll put someone on top of.
As a chairman.
Yeah. And that may move things around to sort of shift the spotlight.
Yeah.
But Zuckerberg still owns the great majority of power here.
And he's way too high a profile figure now to actually hide anymore.
Correct.
Okay, Russia's premier intelligence agency has launched another campaign to pierce the U.S. government, corporate, and think tank computer networks, according to Microsoft. Apparently, Putin has sent out word, let's go after everybody, to this SVR, which is their intelligence agency. Microsoft insists the percentage of successful breaches was small, but it did not provide any more information. So Russia's making a concerted effort to try to get involved and hack everything again.
I don't know. It's almost as if we have a pretty major election coming.
Yeah, I wonder why it's happening right
It's
now.
like the leaves are changing and we've got
It's time
cybersecurity
for,
concerns.
cybersecurity. Okay, and finally, you thought buying a brand new supercar was expensive. Have you read about this California license plate? You buy the license plate and you get the NFT with it.
An NFT.
And it's estimated it's currently up for sale in the state of California for $24.3 million. So it's actually more expensive than a Bugatti. And you get a license plate, and I got a kick out of this because what's on it? 2 letters, MM.
Hey.
So I'm thinking
Right.
about, I got up this morning, I thought, cut back on coffee money, look for some, coins in the couches and all that.
24.3 million, you'll have that somewhere.
I could drive around with my own personalized MM license plate.
The funny thing is, you could probably do that for a lot less money
Yeah.
as a taxpayer in California, as a licensed driver. You wouldn't have the NFT, which who knows what that'll be worth in a day, not to mention 10 years, but you'd have a license plate just like everybody else.
Yeah, and everybody would think that
Right.
I have the $25 million NFT. It'd be very Silicon Valley, wouldn't it?
That would be extremely Silicon Valley. In fact, it would be a shame if someone elsewhere
Yeah.
bought that NFT
Absolutely.
just because. Yeah,
Elon, he can afford it now.
that's right, and he's in Texas,
He's in Texas, but he's part-time here.
LA. That's
yeah.
right. That's
Well,
right.
he can park it up at his R&D facility that's still in Palo Alto
That's true.
and drive it around.
That's true.
Okay. That's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.